If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description. If you've been anywhere near X lately checking out Silksong content, you already know what this video is about. But if you're one of those sane people who avoids that dumpster fire of a platform, first off, congratulations. And second, let me catch you up. A post dropped claiming that the Rite of Rebirth quest in Silksong is an allegory for abortion, and the discord around it quickly devolved into a full-on thread storm. Everyone had something to say about it. Even I got in on the action because I had some thoughts, and this video is where I lay it all out and defend my stance. And my stance? This sequence is not an abortion allegory. At least, not intentionally. And that word intentionally is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Because guess what, suckers? You just clicked on a language arts lesson disguised as a Silksong video. Hey, I'm the Metroidvania guru, former English teacher, professor, and your guide through the tangled threads of Silksong's most controversial side quest. Today, we're breaking it down through the lens of new criticism, a literary theory that focuses on the text itself, not the author's intent or player reactions. Because when you stick to what's on the page or screen, a surface level reading can lead to a full-blown metaphorical misfire. Oh, and a quick heads up, this video isn't a debate on the morality of abortions. That's not the focus here, and dragging that into the comments is just going to derail the actual conversation. So let's keep things on topic and respectful. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Let's start with a little literary theory. Don't worry, this will be painless. We're talking about two ways of interpreting art: new criticism and transactional theory. New criticism is a formalist approach to analyzing literature. It says, forget the author, forget the audience, just look at the text. Meaning lives in the structure, the language, the symbols. You don't need interviews, devlogs, or Reddit threads. You only need the work itself. It's all about close reading. You dissect the quest, the mechanics, the dialogue, the game's recurring themes, and ask, what is this sequence doing? What tensions does it create? What themes does it reinforce? Transactional theory, on the other hand, says art is a conversation. Meaning is created through the interaction between the reader and the text. Your personal experiences, emotions, and cultural background shape how you interpret what you see. In video games, that lens is shaped by how you play, what you notice, and what you bring to the table. And these transactions are valid. They're beautiful. That's why I and many others say art is transactional. Every player brings their own lens to Silksong, and that lens colors how they experience Hornet's journey. When you bring your own thoughts, feelings, and experiences into the interpretation, it's called reader response, and it's part of the transaction. You see a parasite and think of pregnancy. You see a surgical operation and think of abortion. That's not wrong to make these interpretations. It's emotional, it's personal, it's human. But here's the catch. Relying solely on reader response can lead to misreading, especially when it overrides the text's internal logic and thematic structure. That's where a new critical lens comes in handy. We all come from different backgrounds with different lived experiences, and while that diversity of response is natural, trying to absorb every interpretation can overwhelm the story and dilute its meaning. More often than not, analyzing what's actually in front of us without projecting our own feelings and experiences leads to a more coherent interpretation, one that aligns with the story's internal logic and core themes. And in Silksong, those themes are identity, autonomy, and the preservation of maternal legacy. So you can kind of see how interpreting this scene as an abortion allegory clashes with one of those themes, yeah? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Now that we've laid the theoretical groundwork, let's crack this quest open and see what it's actually doing. In the side quest called Rite of Rebirth, Hornet finds a so-called item called the Twisted Bud. In the inventory screen, it squirms and makes unsettling noises. Before picking it up, it even sounds like a baby crying. Eventually, Hornet's led to an NPC who asks her to offer the Twisted Bud for the rite. And when she does, well... things go south fast. Hornet wakes up embedded in roots inside a dark cave. After breaking free, she discovers her crest loadout has completely changed and she can no longer use her silk to heal. Anytime she tries, these creepy tentacles wrap around her instead. She eventually finds Yarnaby, a physician exiled from Belhart for being, quote, callous and crude in her practice. Yarnaby asks Hornet to travel to Sinner's Road to retrieve equipment needed for an infestation removal operation. Hornet brings back the gear, the doctor performs the procedure, but the result isn't the removal of the parasite. Instead, the parasite is weakened just enough so Hornet can control it. This is how she earns the Witch Crest, a crest that lets her sprout the same tentacles that once hindered her, now repurposed to leech life from her enemies. At a surface level reading, I get why people interpret the sequence as an abortion allegory. Hornet is forcibly injected with the parasite, without consent. She awakens hunched over and in pain, as if experiencing cramps. Her body has transformed, and she no longer has autonomy over it. She must seek out a disgraced doctor to perform a secret operation. Hornet travels to what is quite literally a seedy back alley to retrieve the equipment for that procedure. And when it's all done, she's rewarded with the Witch Crest, witch being a historically sexist label for women who defy societal norms. Given that Farloom is a deeply religious society, it's not a stretch to assume its denizens would oppose abortion. So yeah, on the surface, this reads like a metaphor for reproductive control. However, when you stack this abortion reading against Silksong's thematic spine and its near constant parasitic symbolism, it starts to fall apart. The metaphor simply doesn't hold, at least not in a way that aligns with the game's narrative structure or the story it's actually telling. So here's my take. When you strip away the surface level reading and look at Rite of Rebirth through a new critical lens, the quest isn't about abortion, it's about identity reclamation. Hornet is forcibly altered by a parasite. She loses control over her body, her abilities, her agency. That's not a metaphor for reproduction, it's a metaphor for imposed identity, for being reshaped by forces beyond your control. The operation she undergoes isn't a termination, it's a transformation. The parasite isn't removed, and last time I checked, that's not how abortions work. The parasite remains in Hornet's body, weakened, subjugated, and Hornet learns to wield it. That's not a rejection or termination, that's integration. She doesn't shed the burden, nor does she let it define her. She redefines it. She reclaims it. This is a quest about autonomy, about taking back control, about turning what once hindered you into a source of power. And when you read it closely, without projecting your own thoughts or being influenced by external forces, you start to see how it fits perfectly into Silksong's thematic spine. Because Silksong isn't just about movement and combat. It's about identity, autonomy, and the preservation of maternal legacy. So yeah, when you read Rite of Rebirth on its own terms, it's not an abortion allegory. It's a story of transformation, of reclaiming your identity, of rewriting the terms of your inheritance. To understand why the abortion metaphor misfires, we need to look at what Silksong is actually doing. Its thematic spine isn't vague or ambiguous. It's woven into the dialogue, the characters, the cutscenes, the quests. And when you read the game closely, 3 core themes emerge: identity, autonomy, and the preservation of maternal legacy. Let's start with the Red Memory sequence. Hornet is confronted by the maternal forces that shaped her: Hera, the White Lady, Vespa, the Weavers. Each one tries to mold her into what they think she should be. The Weavers even question her existence outright. Prove yourself more Weaver than Worm. But Hornet doesn't fold. She listens, she reflects, and then she defines herself, not as a copy, but as a synthesis. You see this most clearly in her exchange with the White Lady. The lady says, "For our ways you will think us harsh, uncaring, unrepentant." And Hornet responds, not with rejection, but with resolve. "You are wrong, lady. I knew this wish and the price to achieve it. Strength, in mind, in care, in claw. Strength enough that I may live to see a world better than our own, or to craft a world as I desire. That was the wish of my mother, of my mentor, and of you." In that moment, Hornet isn't just aligning with her mentors, she's claiming their legacy on her own terms. She's asserting her identity, her autonomy, and her inheritance. All three themes in one scene. And to drive it home, she literally sheds her pale entity attire and dons her iconic red cloak, visually marking the moment she chooses who she is. Not what she was made to be, but what she wants to become. And as perfect as that moment is, it's not the only time we see these themes at work. Enter Hornet's foil, Lace. Where Hornet seeks to preserve, Lace seeks to destroy. Where Hornet embraces her duty with grace and resolve, Lace scoffs at her mother's legacy and at her own place within it. Lace would kill Hornet just to deny her mother satisfaction. She even maims her mother to save Hornet, if it means her mother will suffer. Yet, despite all this, Grandmother Silk sacrifices everything, even threatens to destroy her entire kingdom to protect a daughter who doesn't even love her. If that doesn't showcase Silksong's reverent stance toward the power of motherhood, then I don't know what does. With Silksong's constant reverence for the power and beauty of motherhood, you can probably see how an abortion allegory, a denial of motherhood, clashes with the game's thematic core. So if this procedure isn't an abortion proxy, what is it? Simply put, it's a microcosm of Hornet's ability to synthesize and reclaim her identity. The twisted bud symbolizes external forces worming their way into Hornet's mind, challenging her sense of self. Prove yourself more weaver than worm. That's not just a question, it's a threat to her identity. But Hornet resists. She fights the parasite, this forced inheritance threatening to override her. And through the operation, she doesn't actually remove it, which is very much not how abortions work. Instead, she tames it, she dominates it, she synthesizes it into a part of herself that gives her new strength and reinforces her true identity. The abortion allegory is a tough sell for a few reasons. First, the parasite isn't terminated like how actual abortions terminate a fetus. It's weakened, integrated, and weaponized. That alone breaks the metaphor. But more importantly, you'd have to show me where Silksong does two very specific things. One, where does the game conflate babies with parasites? And two, where does it depict motherhood as a burden to be shed? If you can answer those with actual in-game evidence, I'll listen. I could even be persuaded. But to my knowledge, that evidence doesn't exist. And you might be thinking, not every plot point needs to enforce the story's themes. Yeah, they do actually. If a moment doesn't reinforce the narrative's spine, then why is it there? If you can cut something from a story and it doesn't change anything, it's filler. And filler is dead weight. You ever watch a show with that one episode that feels totally out of place? Usually it's because it follows a character or arc that doesn't fit the rest of the story. These episodes become the most hated for a reason. They're a waste of time. One example's Stranger Things, The Lost Sister. A complete detour from the plot and themes. Most episodes sit around 8 or 9 stars on IMDb. That one, barely a 6. And then there's Avatar: The Last Airbender, The Great Divide, a filler episode that doesn't develop the plot or the characters. Most episodes score in the high 8s or 9s. This one, almost a 7. So if you're going to argue that Rite of Rebirth is an abortion allegory, you need to prove it fits within Silksong's thematic framework. Otherwise, it's just noise, and Silksong doesn't do noise. Because that's bad writing. And with how efficient and intentional Silksong's storytelling is, you've got yourself another tough sell if you think they'd wedge in a ham-fisted metaphor that undercuts their masterpiece. Let's finish this by addressing the most dehumanizing part of this argument: babies as parasites. Throughout this discourse, I've heard people claim that fetuses are medically defined as parasites. That's just patently untrue. In fact, peer-reviewed articles from sources like the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences say the exact opposite. I've linked one article in the description. Now, I'm not sharing this article as a moral stance on abortion. I'm sharing it as a direct rebuke to those trying to push an abortion narrative in Silksong. Babies aren't considered parasites by any medical definition, and I highly doubt Team Cherry is pushing that idea, especially since there's not a single instance in the game that equates babies with parasites. You know what are parasites? Actual parasites. Silksong is loaded with parasites and parasitic symbolism. Grandmother Silk feeding off the weavers, the Citadel exploiting the labor of the lower class, the literal parasites that cling to you in bile water. This imagery and symbolism is everywhere, and it's not about reproduction. It's about power imbalances, exploitation, and the destruction that follows. And this metaphor collapses under its own weight if you equate every instance of parasite removal with abortion. Did the disgraced Lugoli just impregnate Hornet? Did she perform an abortion mid-fight? Does Hornet get pregnant every time she falls into biowater? Is sitting on a bench an abortion? It's absurd, and it's a reach. Plain and simple. So there, I rest my case. The abortion allegory doesn't hold up under scrutiny. It clashes with Silksong's thematic spine, misreads its parasite symbolism, and ignores the game's reverent treatment of maternal legacy. Now, that's not to say transactional readings don't have value. They do. Your lived experience can shape how you connect with the story, and that's powerful. But when you're talking about authorial intent, thematic cohesion, and narrative structure, we need to ground our interpretations in the text itself. That's where new criticism shines. It asks, what does the story say on its own terms? And when you read Silksong closely, the message is clear. This isn't a tale of rejection. It's a tale of reclamation, of identity, autonomy, and legacy. Misreadings matter because they can distort the emotional and thematic impact of a story. And Silksong deserves better than that. It's not just a game, it's a masterpiece of narrative design. So let's read it like one. If you've got a different take, drop it in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you found this breakdown helpful or interesting, give it a like, share it with someone who's deep into Silksong lore, and subscribe. I want to give a shout out to Cranky Templar for allowing me to use his sweet no-hit boss footage as B-roll. This video would have been very boring to watch without it. Be sure to check out all of his highly impressive boss bashing content over on his channel. Links in the description. Until next time, later nerds.